Welcome, welcome, crew, guys, gals, ghouls, friends, fiends, foes, whoever may be listening beyond the Omniverse tonight. Secure your tinfoil hats, buckle down tight, and hold on loosely as we soar over the rocky tops of the La Platas on a rocky mountain high, get sucked into the vortex of the Four Corners, and settle down snugly at mile marker 420 in colorful Colorado. It is Sunday, August 25th, Monday, August 26th for those of you across the pond and beyond. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you, and welcome to We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. I'm your host, TessaTNT, and we are broadcasting live from the Mile High Clubhouse tonight. I'm so glad that you could join us this evening for story time with me, TessaTNT. If you're listening live right now, you may be listening to us on Spreaker.com under We Are Paradox Media. You can also listen to us on KPNL Radio, which you can find at KPNL Radio at kpnl-db.com. You can also listen to us live on eTalk Radio, which you can find at etalk.tv/radio. If you'd like to watch as well as listen, feel free to look us up on Facebook under We Are Paradox Media, YouTube under We Are Paradox Media, as well as Twitch. If you want to listen in your free time, whether you're working it, or working out, just tune in wherever you listen to your podcasts, and you should be able to find us there. Alright, so for story time this evening, we have moved on to, I believe is this the fourth? Yes, this is the fourth book in the series, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And it's been a pretty epic book series so far. I've really, really enjoyed it. Just checking my sound everywhere, making sure we're bouncing, and it appears that we are. And we're glitching too. Glitchy. That looks better. Yay! Alright, let's get on with it. So, this book is So Long and Thanks for All the Fish. I'm excited to get into it. Well, let's crank it. In the beginning it says, for Jane. With thanks to Rick and Heidi for the loan of their stable event to Mogans and Andy and all at Huntsman Court for a number of unstable events, and especially to Sunny Meta for being stable through all events. Prologue. Far out in the uncharted backwaters of the unfashionable end of the western spiral arm of the galaxy lies a small, unregarded yellow sun. Orbiting this at a distance of roughly 98 million miles is an utterly insignificant little blue-green planet whose ape-descended life forms are so amazingly primitive that they still think digital watches are a pretty neat idea. This planet has, or rather had, a problem. Which was this: most of the people living on it were unhappy for pretty much all of the time. Many solutions were suggested for this problem, but most of these were largely concerned with the movements of small green pieces of paper. Which is odd because, on the whole, it wasn't the small green pieces of paper that were unhappy. And so the problem remained. Lots of the people were mean, and most of them were miserable, even the ones with digital watches. Many were increasingly of the opinion that they'd all make a big mistake in coming down from the trees in the first place, and some said that even the trees had been a bad move, and that no one should ever have left the oceans. And then, one Thursday, nearly 2,000 years after, one man had been nailed to a tree for saying how great it would be to be nice to people for a change. A girl sitting on her own in a small cafe in Rickmansworth suddenly realized what it was that had been going wrong all this time, and she finally knew how the world could be made a good and happy place. This time, it was right. It would work, and no one would have to get nailed to anything. Sadly, however, before she could get to a phone and tell anyone about it, the Earth was unexpectedly demolished to make way for a new hyperspace bypass, and so the idea was lost, seemingly forever. This is her story. Chapter 1. That evening, it was dark early, which was normal for the time of year. It was cold and windy, which was normal. It started to rain, which was particularly normal. The spacecraft landed, which was not. There was nobody around to see it, except for some spectacularly stupid quadrupeds who hadn't the faintest idea what to make of it, or whether they were meant to make anything of it, or eat it, or what. So they did what they did to everything, which was to run away from it and try to hide under each other, which never worked. It slipped down out of the clouds, seeming to be balanced on a single beam of light. From a distance, you would scarcely have noticed it through the lightning and storm clouds, but seen from close up, it was strangely beautiful. A great craft of elegantly sculpted form, quite small. Of course, one never has the slightest notion what size or shape different species are going to turn out to be. But if you were to take the findings of the latest mid-galactic census report as any kind of accurate guide to statistical averages, you would probably guess that the craft would hold about 6 people. And you would be right. You'd probably guess that anyway. The census report, like most such surveys, had cost an awful lot of money, and told nobody anything they didn't already know, except that every single person in the galaxy had 2.4 legs, and owned a hyena. Since this was clearly not true, the whole thing eventually had to be scrapped. The craft slid quietly, down through the rain, its dim operating lights seeming to wrap it in tasteful rainbows. It hummed very quietly, a hum that became gradually louder and deeper as it approached the ground, and which at an altitude of 6 inches became a heavy throb. At last it dropped and was quiet. A hatchway opened. A short flight of steps unfolded itself. A light appeared in the opening, a bright light streaming out into the wet night, and shadows moved within. A tall figure appeared in the light, looked around, flinched, and hurried down the steps, carrying a large shopping bag under his arm. He turned and gave a single abrupt wave back to the ship. Already the rain was streaming through his hair. "Thank you," he called out. "Thank you very—" He was interrupted by a sharp crack of thunder. He glanced up apprehensively, and in response to a sudden thought started quickly to rummage through the large plastic shopping bag, which he now discovered had a hole in the bottom. It had large characters printed on the side which read, to anyone who could decipher the Centurion alphabet, "Duty-free, make a market, Port Brasta Alpha Centuri, be like the 22nd elephant with heated value in space, bark."
So I have a problem.
What?
So I don't have any.
Because I have it set out in the bathroom already.
Oh,
Yeah, there you go.
I didn't go in there. I was just okay. Thank you, bro.
You're welcome, boy. "Hold on," the figure called, waving at the ship. The steps, which had started to fold themselves back through the hatchway, stopped, re-unfolded, and allowed him back in. He emerged again a few seconds later, carrying a battered and threadbare towel, which he shoved into the bag. He waved again, hoisted the bag under his arm, and started to run for the shelter of some trees as, behind him, the spacecraft had already begun its ascent. Lightning flitted through the sky and made the figure pause for a moment, and then hurry onward, revising his path to give the trees a wide berth. He moved swiftly across the ground, slipping here and there, hunching himself against the rain which was falling now with ever-increasing concentration, as if being pulled from the sky. His feet sloshed through the mud, thunder grumbled over the hills. He pointlessly wiped the rain off his face and stumbled on. More lights. Not lightning this time, but more diffused and dimmer lights which played slowly over the horizon and faded. The figure paused again on seeing them, and then redoubled his steps, making directly toward the point on the horizon at which they had appeared. And now the ground was becoming steeper, sloping upward, and after another 200 or 300 yards, it led at last to an obstacle. figure paused to examine the barrier and then dropped the bag over it before climbing over it himself. Hardly had the figure touched the ground on the other side than there came a machine sweeping out of the rain towards him with light streaming through the wall of water. The figure pressed back as the machine streaked toward him. It was a low, bulbous shape, like a small whale surfing, sleek, gray, and rounded, and moving at terrifying speed. The figure instinctively threw up his hands to protect himself, but was hit only by a sluice of water as the machine swept past and off into the night. It was illuminated briefly by another flicker of lightning across the sky, which allowed the soaked figure by the roadside a split second to read a small sign at the back of the machine before it disappeared. To the figure's apparent incredulous astonishment, the sign read, "My other car is also a Porsche." Well then. Chapter 2. Rob McKenna was a miserable bastard, and he knew it because he'd had a lot of people pointed out to him over the years, and he saw no reason to disagree with them except the obvious one, which was that he liked disagreeing with people. Particularly people he disliked, which included, at the last count, everybody. He heaved a sigh and shoved down a gear. The hill was beginning to steepen, and his lorry was heavy with Danish thermostatic radiator controls. It wasn't that he was naturally predisposed to be so surely. At least he hoped not. It was just the rain that got him down. Always the rain. It was raining now, just for a change. It was a particular type of rain that he particularly disliked, particularly when he was driving. He had a number for it. It was rain type 17. He had read somewhere that the Eskimos had over 200 different words for snow, without which their conversation would probably have got very monochronomous and monotonous. So they would distinguish between thin snow and thick snow, light snow and heavy snow, sludgy snow, brittle snow, snow that came in flurries, snow that came in drifts, snow that came in on the bottom of your neighbor's boots all over your nice, clean igloo floor, the snows of winter, the snows of spring, the snows you remember from your childhood that were so much better than any of your modern snow, fine snow, feathery snow, hill snow, valley snow, snow that falls in the morning, snow that falls at night, snow that falls all of a sudden just when you were going out fishing, and snow that despite all your efforts to train them, the Huskies have pissed on. Rob McKenna had 231 different types of rain entered in his little book, and he didn't like any of them. He shifted down another gear, and the lorry heaved its revs up. It grumbled in a comfortable sort of way about all the Danish thermostatic radiator controls it was carrying. Since he had left Denmark the previous afternoon, he had been through types 33, light pricking drizzle which made the road slippery, 39, heavy spotting, 47 to 51, vertical light drizzle, through to sharply slanting light to moderate drizzle, freshening, 87 and 88, two finely distinguished varieties of vertical torrential downpour, 100, post downpour, squalling cold, all the sea storm types between 192 and 213 at once. 123, 124, 126, 127, mild and intermediate cold gusting regular, and syncopated cadron. 11, breezy droplets, and now his least favorite of all, 17. Rain type 17 was a dirty bladder battering against his windshield so hard that it didn't make much odds whether he had his wipers on or off. He tested his theory by turning them off briefly, but as it turned out, the visibility did get quite a lot worse. It just fell to get better again when he turned them back on. In fact, one of the wiper blades began to flap off. Swish, swish, flop, swish, swish, flop, swish, swish, flop, swish, flop, swish, flop, 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 great. He pounded his steering wheel, kicked the door, thumped his cassette player until it suddenly started playing Barry Manilow, thumped it again until it stopped again, and swore and swore and swore and swore and swore. It was at the very moment that his fury was peaking that there loomed swimmingly in his headlights, hardly visible through the bladder, a figure by the roadside. A poor, bedraggled figure, strangely attired, wetter than an otter in a washing machine, and hitching. Poor miserable sod, thought Rob McKenna. Realizing that here was somebody with a better right to feel hard done by than himself. Must be chilled to the bone. Stupid to be out hitching on a filthy night like this. All you get is cold, wet, and lorries driving through puddles at you. He shook his head grimly, heaved another sigh, gave the wheel a turn, and hit a large sheet of water square on. See what I mean? He thought to himself as he plowed swiftly through it. You get some right bastards on the road. Splattered in his rearview mirror, a couple of seconds later, was the reflection of the hitchhiker, drenched by the roadside. For a moment, he felt good about this. A moment or two later, he felt bad about feeling good about it. Then he felt good about feeling bad about feeling good about it, and, satisfied, drove on into the night. At least it made up for finally having been overtaken by the Porsche he had been diligently blocking for the last 20 miles. And as he drove on, the rain clouds dragged down the sky after him, for, though he did not know it, Rob McKenna was a rain god. All he knew was that his working days were miserable, and he had a succession of lousy holidays. All the clouds knew was that they loved him and wanted to be near him, to cherish him, and to water him. Chapter 3. The next two lorries were not driven by rain gods, but they did exactly the same thing. The figure drudged, or rather sloshed, onward, till the hill resumed, and the treacherous sheets of water was left behind. After a while the rain began to ease, and the moon put in a brief appearance from behind the clouds. A Renault drove by, and its driver made frantic and complex signals to the trudging figure to indicate that normally he would have been delighted to give the figure a lift. Only he couldn't this time because he wasn't going in the direction that the figure wanted to go. Whatever direction that might be, and he was sure the figure would understand. He concluded the signaling with a cheery thumbs-up sign as if to say that he hoped the figure felt really fine about being cold and almost terminally wet, and he would catch him next time around. The figure trudged on. A Fiat passed and did exactly the same as the Renault. A Maxi passed on the other side of the road and flashed its lights at the slowly plodding figure, though whether this was meant to convey a hello or a sorry, we're going the other way, or hey look, there's someone in the rain, what a jerk, was entirely unclear. A green strip across the top of the windshield indicated that whatever the message was, it came from Steve and Carola. The storm had now definitely abated, and what thunder there was now grumbled over more distant hills like a man saying, "And another thing," 20 minutes after admitting he'd lost the argument. The air was clear now, the night cold. Sound traveled rather well. The lost figure, shivering desperately, presently reached a junction, where a side road turned off to the left. Opposite the turning stood a signpost, and this figure suddenly hurried to and studied with feverish curiosity, only twisting away from it as another car passed suddenly. And another. The first whisked by with complete disregard. The second flashed meaninglessly. A Ford Cortina passed and put on its brakes. Lurching with surprise, the figure bundled his bag to his chest and hurried forward toward it. But at the last moment, the Cortina spun its wheels in the wet and careened off up the road rather amusingly. The figure slowed to a stop and stood there, lost and dejected. As it chanced, the following day the driver of the Cortina went into the hospital to have its appendix out, only due to a rather amusing mix-up. The surgeon removed his leg in error, and before the appendectomy could be rescheduled, the appendicitis complicated into an entertainingly serious case of peritonitis and justice. and its way was served. The figure trudged on. A sob drew to a halt beside him. Its window wound down, and a friendly voice said, "Have you come far?" The figure turned toward it. He stopped and grasped the handle of the door. The figure, the car, and its door handle were all on a planet called the Earth, a world whose entire entry in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was comprised of 2 words, mostly harmless. The man who wrote this entry was called Ford Prefect, and he was, at this precise moment, on a far-from-harmless world, sitting in a far-from-harmless bar, recklessly causing trouble. Thanks, Art. Chapter 4. Well, that got blurry for a second. Whether it was because he was drunk, ill, or suicidally insane would not have been apparent to a casual observer, and indeed there were no casual observers in the old Pink Dog Bar on the lower south side of Candold City, because it wasn't the sort of place you could afford to do things casually in if you wanted to stay alive. Any observers in the place would have been mean, hawk-like observers, heavily armed, with painful throbbings in their heads, which caused them to do crazy things when they observed things that they didn't like. One of those nasty hushes had descended on the place, a missile crisis sort of hush. Even the evil-looking bird perched on a rod in the bar had stopped screeching out the names and addresses of local contract killers, which was a service it provided for free. All eyes were on Ford Prefect. Some of them were on stocks. The particular way in which he was choosing to dice recklessly with death today was by trying to pay for a drinks bill the size of a small defense budget with an American Express card, which was not acceptable anywhere in the known universe. "What are you worried about?" he asked in a cheery kind of voice. "The expiration date? Haven't you guys ever heard of neo-relativity out here? There are whole new areas of physics which can take care of this sort of thing. Time dilation effects, temporal relativistics. We are not worried about the expiration date," said the man to whom he addressed these remarks, who was a dangerous barman in a dangerous city. His voice was a low, soft purr, like the low, soft purr made by the opening of the ICBM silo. A hand like a side of meat tapped lightly on the bar top, lightly denting it. "Well, that's good then," said Ford, packing his satchel and preparing to leave. The tapping finger reached out and rested lightly on the shoulder of Ford Prefect. It prevented him from leaving. Although the finger was attached to a slab-like hand, the hand was attached to a club-like forearm. The forearm wasn't attached to anything at all, except in the metaphorical sense that it was attached by a fierce dog-like loyalty to the bar which was its home. It had previously been more conventionally attached to the original owner of the bar, who, on his deathbed, had unexpectedly bequeathed it to medical science. Medical science had decided they didn't like the look of it, and had bequeathed it right back to the old Pink Dog Bar. The new barman didn't believe in the supernatural, or poltergeists, or anything kooky like that. He just knew a useful alley when he saw one. The hand sat on the bar. It took orders. It served drinks. It dealt murderously with people who behaved as if they wanted to be murdered. Ford Prefect sat still. "We're not worried about the expiration date," repeated the barman, satisfied that he now had Ford Prefect's full attention. "We are worried about the whole piece of plastic." "What?" said Ford. He seemed a little taken aback. "This," said the barman, holding out the card as if it were a small fish whose soul had 3 weeks earlier winged its way to the land where fish are eternally blessed. "We don't accept it." Ford wondered briefly whether to raise the fact that he didn't have any other means of payment on him, but decided for the moment to soldier on. The disembodied hand was now grasping his shoulder lightly, but firmly between its finger and thumb. "But you don't understand," said Ford, his expression slowly ripening from a little taken abackness into rank incredulity. "This is the American Express card. It is the finest way of settling bills known to man. Haven't you read their junk mail?" The cheery quality of Ford's voice was beginning to grate on the barman's ears. It sounded like someone relentlessly playing the kazoo during one of the more somber passages of a war requiem. One of the bones in Ford's shoulder began to grate against another one of the bones in his shoulder, in a way that suggested the hand had learned the principles of pain from a highly skilled chiropractor. He hoped he could get this business settled before he had started to grate one of the bones in his shoulder against any of the bones in different parts of his body. Luckily, the shoulder it was holding was not the one he had his satchel slung over. The barman slid the card back across the bar at Ford. "We have never," he said with muted savagery, "heard of this thing." This was hardly surprising. Ford had only acquired it through a serious computer error toward the end of the 15-year sojourn he had spent on the planet Earth. Exactly how serious, the American Express Company had gotten to know very rapidly, and the increasingly strident and panic-stricken demands of its debt collection department only silenced by the unexpected demolition of the entire planet by the Vogons, to make way for a new hyperspace bypass. He had kept it ever since because he found it useful to carry a form of currency that no one would accept. "Credit," he said. "Arg." These two words were usually coupled in the old Pink Dog bar. "I thought," gasped Ford, "that this was meant to be a class establishment." He glanced around at the motley collection of thugs, pimps, and record company executives that skulked on the edges of the dim pools of light with which the dark shadows of the bar's inner recesses were pitted. They were all very deliberately looking in any direction but his, carefully picking up the threads of their former conversations about murders, drug rings, and music publishing deals. They knew what would happen now and didn't want to watch in case it put them off their drinks. "You're gonna die, boy," murmured the barman quietly at Ford Prefect, and the evidence was on his side. The bar used to have a hanging up one of those signs that read, "Please don't ask for credit, as a punch in the mouth often offends." But in the interest of strict accuracy, this was altered to, "Please don't ask for credit because having your throat torn out by a savage bird while a disembodied hand smashes your head against the bar often offends." However, this made an unreadable mess of the notice, and anyway, didn't have the same ring to it, so it was taken down again. It was felt that the story would get about of its own accord, and it had. "Let me look at that bill again," said Ford. He picked it up, studied it thoroughly and thoughtfully under the malevolent gaze of the barman, and the equally malevolent gaze of the bird, which was currently gouging great furrows in the bar top with its talons. It was a rather lengthy piece of paper. At the bottom of it was a number that looked like one of those serial numbers you find on the underside of stereo sets, which always takes so long to copy on to a registration form. He had, after all, been in the bar all day. He had been drinking a lot of stuff with bubbles in it, and he had bought an awful lot of rounds for all the pimps, thugs, and record executives who suddenly couldn't remember who he was. He cleared his throat rather quietly and patted his pockets. There was, as he knew, nothing in them. He rested his left hand lightly but firmly on the half-open flap of his satchel. The disembodied hand renewed its pressure on his right shoulder. "You see," said the barman, and his face seemed to wobble heavily in front of Ford's, "I have a reputation to think of. You see that, don't you?" This is it, thought Ford. There was nothing else for it. He had obeyed the rules. He had made a bona fide attempt to pay his bill. It had been rejected. He was now in danger of his life. Well, he said quietly, "if it's your reputation." With a sudden flash of speed, he opened his satchel and slapped down on the bar top his copy of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and the official card which said that he was a field researcher for the guide and absolutely not allowed to do what he was now doing. "Want to ride up?" The barman's face stopped in mid-wobble. The bird's talons stopped in mid-furrow. The hand slowly released its grip. "That," said the barman in a barely audible whisper from between dry lips, "will do nicely, sir." Chapter 5. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is a powerful organ. Indeed, its influence is so prodigious that strict rules had to be drawn up by its editorial staff to prevent its misuse. So none of its field researchers is allowed to accept any kind of services, discounts, or preferential treatment of any kind in return for editorial favors unless A. they have made a bona fide attempt to pay for a service in the normal way, B. their lives would be otherwise in danger, or C. they really want to. Since invoking the third rule involved giving the editor a cut, Ford always preferred to muck about with the first two. He stepped out along the street, walking briskly. The air was stifling, but he liked it because it was stifling city air, full of excitingly unpleasant smells, dangerous music, and the distant sound of warring police tribes. He carried his satchel with an easy swaying motion, so that he could get a good swing at anybody who tried to take it from him without asking. It contained everything he owned, which at the moment wasn't much. A limousine careened down the street, dodging between the piles of burning garbage, and frightening an old pack animal which lurched, screeching, out of its way, stumbled against the windows of the herbal remedy shop, set off a wailing alarm, blundered off down the street, and then pretended to fall down the steps of a small Italian restaurant, where it knew it would get photographed and fed. Ford was walking north. He thought he was probably on his way to the spaceport, but he had thought that before. He knew he was going through that part of the city where people's plans often changed quite abruptly. "Do you want to have a good time?" said a voice from a doorway. "As far as I can tell," said Ford, "I'm having one, thanks." "Are you rich?" said another. This made Ford laugh. He turned and opened his arms in a wide gesture. "Do I look rich?" he said. "Don't know," said the girl. "Maybe, maybe not. Maybe you'll get rich. I have a very special service for rich people." "Oh, yes?" said Ford, intrigued but careful. "And what's that?" "I tell them it's okay to be rich." Gunfire erupted from a window high above them, but it was only a bass player getting shot for playing the wrong riff 3 times in a row, and bass players are 2 a penny in Han-Dold City. Ford stopped and peered into the dark doorway. "You what?" he said. The girl laughed and stepped forward, a little out of the shadow. She was tall and had that kind of self-possessed shyness, which is a great trick if you can do it. "It's my big number," she said. "I have a master's degree in social economics and can be very convincing. People love it, especially in this city." "Gisnar," said Ford Prefect, which was a special Beetlejuicean word he used when he knew he should say something but didn't know what it should be. He sat on a step, took from his satchel a bottle of that old jank spirit and a towel. He opened the bottle and wiped the top of it with the towel, which had the opposite effect to the one intended, in that the old jank spirit instantly killed off millions of germs which had been slowly building up quite a complex and enlightened civilization on the smellier patch of his towel. "Want some?" he said, after he'd had a swig himself. She shrugged and took the proffered bottle. They sat for a while, peacefully listening to the clamor of burglar alarms in the next block. "As it happens, I'm owed a lot of money," said Ford. "So if I ever get a hold of it, can I come and see you then, maybe?" "Sure, I'll be here," said the girl. "So how much is a lot?" 15 years back pay for writing 2 words. Zarquan, said the girl. Which one took the time? The first one. Once I got that second one, just came one afternoon after lunch. A huge electronic drum kit hurtled through the window high above them and smashed itself to bits in the street in front of them. It soon became apparent that some of the burglar alarms on the next block had been deliberately set off by one police tribe in order to lay an ambush for the other. Cars with screaming sirens converged on the area, only to find themselves being picked off by helicopters which came thudding through the air between the city's mountainous tower blocks. In fact, said Ford, having to shout now above the din, it wasn't quite like that. I wrote an awful lot, but they just cut it down. He took his copy of the guide back out of his satchel. Then the planet got demolished, he shouted. Really worthwhile job, eh? They've still got to pay me, though. You work for that thing? The girl yelled back. Yeah. Good number. You want to see the stuff I wrote? He shouted, before it gets erased. The new revisions are due to be released tonight over the net. Someone must have found out that the planet I spent 15 years on has been demolished by now. They missed it on the last few revisions, but it can't escape their notice forever. It's getting impossible to talk, isn't it? What? She shrugged and pointed upward. There was a helicopter above them now, which seemed to be involved in a side skirmish with the band upstairs. Smoke was billowing from the building. The sound engineer was hanging out the window by his fingertips, and a maddened guitarist was beating on his fingers with a burning guitar. The helicopter was firing at all of them. Can we move? They wandered down the street, away from the noise. They ran into a street theater group who tried to do a short play for them about the problems of the inner city, but then gave up and disappeared into the small restaurant, most recently patronized by the pack animal. All the time, Ford was poking at the interface panel of the guide. They ducked into an alleyway. Ford squatted on a garbage can while information began to flood over the screen of the guide. He located his entry, Earth, mostly harmless. Almost immediately, the screen became a mass of system messages. Here it comes, he said. Please wait, said the messages. Entries are being updated over the sub-Ethernet. This entry is being revised. The system will be down for 10 seconds. At the end of the alley, a still gray limousine crawled past. Hey, look, said the girl. If you get paid, look me up. I'm a working girl, and there are people over there who need me. I gotta go. She brushed aside Ford's half-articulated protest and left him sitting dejectedly on his garbage can, preparing to watch a large swath of his work life being swept away electronically into the ether. Out in the street, things had calmed down a little. The police battle had moved off to other sectors of the city. The few surviving members of the rock band had agreed to recognize their musical differences and pursue solo careers. The street theater group was re-emerging from the Italian restaurant with the pack animal, telling it that they would take it to a bar they knew, where it would be treated with a little respect, and a little way farther on the still gray limousine was parked silently by the curb. She hurried toward it. Behind her in the darkness of the alley, a green flickering glow was bathing Ford Prefect's face, and his eyes were slowly widening in astonishment. For where he had expected to find nothing, an erased closed-off entry, there was instead a continuous stream of data. Text, diagrams, figures, and images, moving descriptions of surf on Australian beaches, yogurt on Greek islands, restaurants to avoid in Los Angeles, currency deals to avoid in Istanbul, weather to avoid in London, bars to go everywhere, pages and pages of it. It was all there, everything he had written. With a deepening frown of blank incomprehension, he went backward and forward through it, stopping here and there at various entries. Tips for aliens in New York. Land anywhere, Central Park anywhere, no one will care or indeed even notice. Surviving. Get a job as a cab driver immediately. A cab driver's job is to drive people anywhere they want to go in big yellow machines called taxis. Don't worry if you don't know how the machine works and you can't speak the language, don't understand the geography or indeed the basic physics of the area, and have large green antennae growing out of your head. Believe me, this is the best way of staying inconspicuous. If your body is really weird, try showing it to people in the streets for money. Amphibious life forms from many of the worlds in the swirling, noxious, and Mazalia systems will particularly enjoy the East River, which is said to be richer in those lovely life-giving nutrients than the finest and most virulent laboratory slime yet achieved. Having fun. This is the big section. It is impossible to have more fun without electrocuting your pleasure center. Ford flipped the switch, which he saw was marked Mode Execute Ready, instead of the old-fashioned Access Standby, and had so long ago replaced the appallingly Stone Age Off. This was a planet he had seen completely destroyed, seen with his own two eyes, or rather blinded, as he had been, by the hellish disruption of air and light. Felt with his own 2 feet as the ground had started to pound at him like a hammer, bucking, roaring, gripped by tidal waves of energy pouring out of the loathsome yellow Vogon ships. And then at last, 5 seconds after the moment he had determined as being the last possible moment had already passed, he felt the gently swinging nausea of dematerialization as he and Arthur Dent had been beamed up through the atmosphere like a sports broadcast. There was no mistake. There couldn't have been. The Earth had definitely been destroyed. Definitely boiled away into space. And yet here he activated the guide again. Was his own entry on how you would set about having a good time in Bournemouth, Dorset, England, which he had always prided himself on as being one of the most baroque pieces of invention he had ever delivered. He read it again and shook his head in sheer wonder. Suddenly he realized that the answer to the problem was, and it was this, that something very weird was happening. And if something very weird was happening, he thought he wanted it to be happening to him. He stashed the guide back in his satchel and hurried out onto the street. Walking north again, he passed a still gray limousine parked by the curve, and from a nearby doorway he heard a soft voice saying, "It's okay, honey. It's really okay. You got to learn to feel good about it. Look at the way the whole economy is structured." Ford grinned, detoured around the next block, which was now in flames, found a police helicopter that was standing unattended in the street, broke into it, strapped himself in, crossed his fingers, and sent it hurling inexpertly into the sky. He weaved terrifyingly up through the canyon walls of the city, and once clear of them, hurtled through the black and red pall of smoke that hung permanently above it. 10 minutes later, with all the copter's sirens blaring and its rapid-fire cannon blasting at random into the clouds, Ford Prefect brought it careening down among the gantries and landing lights at the handled city spaceport, where it settled like a gigantic, startled, and very noisy gnat. Since he hadn't damaged it too much, he was able to trade it in for a first-class ticket on the next ship leaving the system, and he settled into one of its huge, voluptuous, body-hugging seats. This was going to be fun, he thought to himself, as the ship blinked silently across the insane distances of the deep space, and the cabin service got into its full, extravagant swing. "Yes, please," he said to the cabin attendants, whenever they glided up to offer him anything at all. He smiled with a curious kind of manic joy as he flipped again through the mysteriously reinstated entry of the planet Earth. He had a major piece of unfinished business that he would now be able to attend to, and he was terribly pleased that the life had suddenly furnished him with a serious goal to achieve. It suddenly occurred to him to wonder where Arthur Dent was, and if he knew. Arthur Dent was 1,437 light years away, innocent and anxious. Behind him in the back seat was a girl who had made him crack his head on the door as he had climbed in. He didn't know if it was just because she was the first female of his own species that had laid eyes on him, or he had laid eyes on in years, or what it was, but he felt stupefied with this is absurd, he told himself. Calm down, he told himself. You are not, he continued to himself in the firmest internal voice he could muster, in a fit and rational state. You have just hitchhiked over 100,000 light years across the galaxy. You are very tired, a little confused, and extremely vulnerable. Relax, don't panic, concentrate on breathing deeply. He twisted round in his seat. Are you sure she's all right? He said again. Beyond the fact that she was, to him, heart-thumpingly beautiful, he could make out very little. How tall she was, how old she was, the exact shading of her hair. And he couldn't ask her anything about herself because, sadly, she was completely unconscious. She's just drugged, said her brother, shrugging, not moving his eyes from the road ahead. And that's all right, is it? Said Arthur in alarm. Suits me, he said. Ah, said Arthur. He added after a moment's thought. Conversation so far had been going astoundingly badly. After an initial flurry of opening hellos, he and Russell, the wonderful girl's brother's name was Russell, a name which Arthur's mind always suggested burly men with blonde mustaches and blow-dried hair who would at the slightest provocation start wearing velvet tuxedos and frilly shirt fronts and would then have to be forcibly restrained from commentating on billiards matches. Had quickly discovered that they didn't like each other at all. Russell was a burly man. He had a blonde mustache. His hair was fine and blow-dried. To be fair to him, though, Arthur didn't see any necessity for this beyond the sheer mental exercise of it. He, Arthur, was himself looking pretty grim. A man can't cross 100,000 light years mostly in other people's baggage compartments without being to fray a little, and Arthur had frayed a lot. She's not a junkie, said Russell suddenly, as if he clearly thought that someone else in the car might be. She's under sedation. But that's terrible, said Arthur, twisting round to look at her again. She seemed to stir slightly, and her head slipped sideways on her shoulder. Her dark hair fell across her face, obscuring it. What's the matter with her? Is she ill? No, said Russell. Merely barking mad. What? Said Arthur, horrified. Loopy, completely bananas. I'm taking her back to the hospital and telling them that I have another go. They let her out while she was still thought she was a hedgehog. A hedgehog? Russell hooted his horn fiercely at a car that came round the corner toward them halfway across on their side of the road, making them swerve. The anchor seemed to make him feel better. Well, maybe not a hedgehog, he said after he'd settled down again, though it would probably be simpler to deal with if she did. If somebody thinks they're a hedgehog, presumably you just give them a mirror and a few pictures of hedgehogs and tell them to sort it out for themselves. Come down again when they feel better. At least medical science could deal with it. That's the point. Seems that's not good enough for Finny, though. Finny? You know what I got her for Christmas? Well, no. Black's Medical Dictionary. Nice present. I thought so. Thousands of diseases in it, all in alphabetical order. You say her name is Finny? Yeah, take your pick, I said. Anything in here can be dealt with. The proper drugs can be prescribed, but no, she has to have something different just to make life difficult. She was like that at school, you know. Was she? She was. Fell over playing hockey and broke a bone nobody had ever heard of. You can see how that would be irritating, said Arthur doubtfully. She was rather disappointed to discover her name was Finny. It was a rather silly, dispiriting name, such as an unloved maiden aunt might vote herself if she couldn't sustain the name Finella properly. Not that I wasn't sympathetic, continued Russell. but it did get a bit irritating. She was limping for months. He slowed down. This is your exit, isn't it? Ah, no, said Arthur. 5 miles further on, if that's all right. Okay, said Russell, with a very tiny pause to indicate that it wasn't, and speeded up again. It was, in fact, Arthur's exit, but he couldn't leave without finding out something more about this girl, who seemed to have taken such a grip on his mind without even waking up. He could take either of the next 2 exits. They led back to the village that had been his home, though what he would find there he hesitated to imagine. Familiar landmarks had been flitting by, ghost-like, in the dark, giving rise in him to the shudders that only very, very normal things can create, when seen where the mind is unprepared for them and in an unfamiliar light. By his own personal timescale, so far as he could estimate it, living as he could, under the alien rations of distant suns, it was 8 years since he had left. But what time had passed here he could hardly guess. Indeed, what events had passed were beyond his exhausted comprehension, because this planet, his home, should not be here. 8 years ago at lunchtime, this planet had been demolished, utterly destroyed by the huge yellow Vogon ships, which had hung in the lunchtime sky as if the law of gravity was no more than a logical local regulation, and breaking it no more than just a parking offense. Delusions, said Russell. What? Said Arthur, startled out of his train of thought. She says she suffers from strange delusions, that she's living in the real world. It's no good telling her that she is living in the real world, because she just says that's why the delusions are so strange. Don't know about you, but I find that kind of conversation pretty exhausting. Give her the tablets and piss off for a beer is my answer. I mean, you can only muck about so much, can't you? Arthur frowned, not for the first time. Well, and all this dreams and nightmare stuff, and the doctor's going on about strange jumps in her brainwave patterns. Jumps? This, said Finney. Arthur whirled round in his seat and stared into her suddenly open but utterly vacant eyes. Whatever she was looking at wasn't in the car. Her eyes fluttered, her head jerked once, and then she was sleeping peacefully. What did she say? He asked anxiously. What is it?
So I was making rabbit, but then Tina saw me put the powder, what she tasted with, and then she got at me, ran over to her school, but she had.
Yeah.
So I poured it back in there, pulled it out, put my spoon in there, not actually, and then took it out, put it on the floor, and then like I was pouring something in there.
Silly boy.
Yeah.
She said, This. This what? This what? How the heck should I know? This hedgehog, that chimney pot, the other pair of Don Alfonso's tweezers. She's barking mad. I thought I'd mention that. You don't seem to care very much, Arthur tried to say it as matter-of-factly as possible, but it didn't seem to work. Look, Buster. Okay, I'm sorry. It's none of my business. I didn't mean to sound like that, said Arthur. I know you care a lot, obviously, he added, lying. I know that you have to deal with it somehow. You'll have to excuse me, I just hitched from the other side of the Horsehead Nebula. He stared furiously out the window. He was astonished that all of the sensations fighting for room in his head on this night as he returned to the home that he thought had vanished into oblivion forever. The one that was compelling him was an obsession with the bizarre girl of whom he knew nothing other than that she had said this to him, and that he wouldn't wish her brother on a Vogon. So, what were the jumps? These jumps you mentioned, he went on to say as quickly as he could. Look, this is my sister. I don't even know why I'm talking to you about. Okay, I'm sorry. Perhaps you'd better let me out. This is. At the moment he said it, it became impossible because the storm which had passed them by suddenly erupted again. Lightning belted through the sky, and someone seemed to be pouring something which closely resembled the Atlantic Ocean over them, through a sieve. Russell swore and stared intently for a few seconds as the sky blattered at them. He worked out his anger by rashly accelerating to pass a lorry marked McKinnon's all-weather haulage. The tension eased as the rain subsided. It started out with all that business of the CIA agent they found in the reservoir, when everybody had all the hallucinations and everything, you remember? Arthur wondered for a moment whether to mention again that he had just hitchhiked back from the other side of the Horsehead Nebula and was for this and various other related and astounding reasons a little out of touch with recent events, but he decided it would only confuse matters further. No, he said. That was the moment she cracked up. She was in the cafe somewhere, Rickmansworth. Don't know what she was doing there, but that was where she cracked up. Apparently she stood up, calmly announced that she had undergone some extraordinary revelation or something, wobbled a bit, looked confused, and finally collapsed screaming into an egg sandwich. Arthur winced. I'm very sorry to hear that, he said, a little stiffly. Russell made a sort of grumpy noise. So what? Said Arthur in an attempt to piece things together. Was the CIA agent doing in the reservoir? Bobbing up and down, of course. He was dead. But what? Come on. Do you remember all that stuff? The hallucinations? Everyone said it was the CIA experimenting with drug warfare or something. Some crackpot theory that instead of invading a country, it would be much cheaper and more effective to make everyone think they'd been invaded. What hallucinations were those exactly? Said Arthur in a rather quiet voice. What do you mean, what hallucinations? I'm talking about all that stuff with the big yellow ships, everyone going crazy and saying, we're going to die! And then pop, they vanished, as the effect wore off. The CIA denied it, which meant it must be true. Arthur's head went a little swimmy. His hand grabbed at something to steady himself, and gripped it tightly. His mouth made little opening and closing movements as if it was on his mind to say something, but nothing emerged. Anyway, continued Russell, whatever drug it was, it didn't seem to wear off so fast with Finney. I was all for suing the CIA, but a lawyer friend of mine said it would be like trying to attack a lunatic asylum with a banana, so he shrugged. The bow gone? Squeaked Arthur. The yellow ship? Vanished? Well, of course they did. They were hallucinations, said Russell, and looked at Arthur oddly. You trying to say you don't remember any of this? Where have you been, for heaven's sake? This was to Arthur such an astonishingly good question that he half leaped out of his seat with shock. Christ! Yelled Russell, fighting to control the car, which was suddenly trying to skid. He pulled it out of the path of an oncoming lorry and swerved up into the grass bank. As the car lurched to a halt, the girl in the back was thrown against Russell's seat and collapsed awkwardly. Arthur twisted around in horror. Is she all right? He blurted out. Russell swept his hands into the back through his blow-dried hair. He tugged at his blonde mustache. He turned to Arthur. Would you please, he said, go up the hangway? Well, on that note, boys and girls, take after me to we are going to go to our first music break. On this break, we have Mia Savage with her band, Antidote for Savages. Oh my goodness, and it already started. Yeah, that was Lemurian Crypto that was playing. So she's going to be singing Lemurian Crypto, Let Me Be Your Home, Art in Reality, and Your Skeleton. You guys don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this music break. Glitching again. There we go. Dang it. Alright. That was Miss Mia Savage with her group Antidote for Savages, and by group I mean her. She does it all. She does the lyrics, she does the music, she does everything. That girl rocks. She's like a little tiny Trent Reznor. you want to look her up, you can look her up on, I believe it's Instagram, and you can also find her videos on the YouTube. Awesome. So we're getting back into story time with Mr. Douglas Adams. So long, and thanks for all the fish. Chapter 6. It's been going pretty well so far. Pretty dang well. From here it was a 4-mile walk to his village, a mile farther to the exit, to which the abominable Russell had now fiercely declined to take him, and from there a farther 3 miles of winding country lane.
White's 99% sure a mosquito flew into his eye and bit it.
Really? How does a mosquito fly into your eye and bite it? Well, I'm sorry.
It says it hurts when it opens it. Well, it hurts to move.
I'm sorry. Here, Lily, you want to drop some of these into his eyeball?
No, it's not fine.
They're allergy eye drops. They could be helpful. My poor little Sunny June, with your little mosquito-bitten bull eye.
No, imagine he just wakes up because he can't close his eye. There's just like this pimple on his eye.
And this for you. There we go. Choose the lid.
How many dots?
2's good. Love you too. Poor boy got mosquito bitten in his ball eye. It's the damnedest thing. The sob seethed off into the night. Arthur watched it go, as stunned as a man might be who, having believed himself to be totally blind for 5 years, suddenly discovers that he had merely been wearing too large a hat. Alright. Come here, boy. That funkadelic shirt. It's funkadelic, man.
For a second,
Is it this one? There you go.
Do I keep it open or closed?
Oh, keep it open, roll your eye around. Where's the lid?
Do you have it?
I'll give it to Lily. Thank you. Alright, now scram. No, it's on the floor. Sorry about that. Floyd got bit in the eyeball by a mosquito. Alright. He shook his head sharply in the hope that it might dislodge some salient fact which would fall into place and make sense of any otherwise utterly bewildering universe. But since the salient fact, if there was one, entirely failed to do this, he set off up the road again, hoping that a good vigorous walk, maybe even some good painful blisters, would help to reassure him that at least his own existence, if not his sanity. It was 10:30 when he arrived, a fact he discovered from the steamed and greasy window of the Horse and Groom pub, in which there had hung for many years a battered old Guinness clock which featured a picture of an emu with a pint glass jammed rather amusingly down its throat. This was the pub in which he had passed the fatal lunchtime during which first his house and then the entire earth had been demolished, or rather had seemed to be demolished. No, damn it! Had been demolished, because if they hadn't been, then where the bloody heck had he been for the last 8 years, and how had he got there if not in one of the big yellow Volgan ships which the appalling Russell had just been telling him were merely drug-induced hallucinations? And yet, if it had been demolished, what was he currently standing on? He jammed the brake on his line of thought because it wasn't going to get him any further than it had the last 20 times he'd been over it. He started again. This was the pub in which he had passed the fatal lunchtime during which whatever it was had happened. But he was going to sort out later had happened, and it still didn't make sense. He started again. This was the pub in which... This was a pub. Pubs served drinks, and he could certainly do with one. Satisfied with this jumbled thought process, had at least arrived at a conclusion, and the conclusion he was happy with, even if it wasn't the one he had set out to achieve. He strode toward the door, and stopped. A small black wire-haired terrier ran out from behind a low wall, and then, catching sight of Arthur clearly, began to snarl. Now Arthur knew this dog, and he knew it well. It longed to be an advertising friend of his, and it was Know-Nothing Bozo, the non-wander dog, because the way its hair stood up on its head reminded people of the President of the United States of America, and the dog knew Arthur, or at least should. It was a stupid dog, but it should at least have been able to recognize Arthur instead of standing there, hackles raised, as if Arthur were the most fearful apparition ever to intrude upon its feeble-witted life. This prompted Arthur to go and peer at the window again, this time with an eye not for the asphyxiating emu, but for himself. Seeing himself for the first time suddenly in a familiar context, he had to admit that the dog had a point. He looked a lot like something a farmer would use to scare birds with, and there was no doubt but that to go into a pub in his present condition would excite comment of a raucous kind, and worse still, there would be doubtless several people in there at the moment whom he knew, all of whom would be bound to bombard him with questions, which at the moment he felt ill-equipped to deal with. Will Smithers, for instance, the owner of the Know-Nothing... Oh, shoot. Here goes my fan. Not my fan! Alright. The Know-Nothing Bozo, the non-wander dog, an animal so stupid that had been sacked from one of Will's own commercials for being incapable of knowing which dog food it was supposed to prefer, despite the fact that the meat in all the bowls had engine oil poured all over it. Ew. Will would definitely be in there. Here was his dog. There was his car, a gray Porsche 928S, with a sign in the back window which read, "My other car is also a Porsche." Damn him. He stared at it and realized that he had just learned something he hadn't known before. Will Smithers, like most of the overpaid and unscrupulous bastards Arthur knew in the advertising world, made a point of changing his car every August so that he could tell people. His accountant made him do it, though the truth was that his accountant was trying like hell to stop him. What with all the alimony he had to pay and so on, and this was the same car Arthur remembered him having before. The number plate proclaimed its year. Given that it was now winter, and that the event which had caused Arthur so much trouble 8 of his personal years ago had occurred at the beginning of September, less than 6 or 7 months could have passed here. He stood terribly still for a moment and let Know-Nothing Bozo jump up and down, yapping at him. He was suddenly stunned by a realization he could no longer avoid, which was this. He was now an alien on his own world. Try as they might, no one was even going to be able to believe his story. Not only did it sound perfectly potty, but it was flatly contradicted by the simplest observable facts. Was this really the Earth? Was it? Was there the slightest possibility that he had made some extraordinary mistake? The pub in front of him was unbearably familiar to him in every detail. Every brick, every piece of peeling paint, and inside he could sense its familiar stuffy, noisy warmth. Its exposed beams, its unauthentic cast-iron light fittings, its bar stick with beer that people he knew had put on in their elbows. Overlooked by cupboard cutouts of girls with packets of peanuts stapled all over their breasts. It was all the stuff of his home, his world. He even knew this blasted dog. "Hey, Know-Nothing." The sound of Will Smithers' voice meant he had to decide what to do quickly. If he stood his ground, he would be discovered, and the whole circus would begin. To hide would only postpone the moment, and it was bitterly cold now. The fact that it was Will made the choice easier. It wasn't that Arthur disliked him as much. It was quite fun. It was just that he was fun in such an exhausting way because, being in advertising, he always wanted you to know how much fun he was having and where he had got his jackpot from. Mindful of this, Arthur hid behind a van. "I know nothing, what's up?" The door opened and Will came out wearing a leather flying jacket that he got a mate of his at the Road Research Laboratory to crash a car into, especially in order to get that battered look. Know Nothing yelped with delight, and having got the attention it wanted, was happy to forgive Arthur. Will was with some friends, and they had a game they played with a dog. "Commies!" they all shouted at the dog in chorus. "Commies, commies, commies!" The dog went berserk with barking, prancing up and down, yapping its little heart out, beside itself in transports of ecstatic rage. They all laughed and cheered it on, then gradually dispersed to their various cars and disappeared into the night. "Well, that clears one thing up," thought Arthur from behind his van. "This is quite definitely the planet that I remember." Chapter 7. His house was still there. How or why he had no idea, but he had decided to go and have a look while he was waiting for the pub to empty, so that he could go and ask the landlord for a bed for the night when everyone else had gone, and there it was. He let himself in with a key he kept under a stone frog in the garden, hurriedly because, astoundingly, the phone was ringing. He had heard it faintly all the way up the lane and had started to run as soon as he realized where the sound was coming from. The door had to be forced open because of the astonishing accumulation of junk mail on the doormat. It jammed itself stuck on what he would later discover were 14 identical personally addressed invitations to apply for a credit card he already had, 17 identical threatening letters for non-payment of bills on a credit card he had, and 33 identical letters saying that he personally had been specially selected as a man of taste and discrimination. Who knew what he wanted and where he was going in today's sophisticated jet-setting world? And would he therefore like to buy some grotty wallet and also a dead tabby kitten? Ew. Really? A dead tabby kitten? He rammed himself through the relatively narrow opening afforded by all this, stumbled through a pile of wine offers that no discriminating connoisseur would want to miss, slithered over a heap of beach villa holidays, blundered up the dark stairs to his bedroom, and got to the phone just as it stopped ringing. He collapsed, panting, onto his cold, musty-smelling bed, and for a few minutes stopped trying to prevent the world from spinning round his head in the way it obviously wanted to. When it had enjoyed its little spin and had calmed down a bit, Arthur reached out for the bedside light, not expecting it to come on. To his surprise, it did. This appealed to Arthur's sense of logic. Since the electricity board had cut him off without fail every time he paid his bill, it seemed only reasonable that they should leave him connected when he hadn't. Sending the money obviously only drew attention to himself. The room was much as he had left it, festeringly untidy, though the effect was muted a little by a thick layer of dust. Half-read books and magazines nestled among piles of half-used towels. Half pairs of socks reclined in half-drunk cups of coffee. What once had been a half-eaten sandwich had now half turned into something that Arthur didn't entirely know or want to know about. Bung the fort of lightning through this lot, he thought to himself, and you'd start the evolution of life all over again. There was only one thing in the room that was different. For the moment or so, he couldn't see what the one thing that was different was because it was too covered in a film of disgusting dust. Then his eyes caught it and stopped. It was next to a battered old television on which it was only possible to watch Open University study courses because if it tried to show anything more exciting, it would break down. It was a box. Arthur pushed himself up on his elbows and peered at it. It was a gray box with a kind of dull luster to it. It was a cubical gray box, just over a foot on one side. It was tied with a single gray ribbon, knotted into a neat bow on the top. He got up, walked over, and touched it in surprise. Whatever it was clearly gift-wrapped, neatly and beautifully, and was waiting for him to open it. Cautiously, he picked it up and carried it back to the bed. He brushed the dust off the top and loosened the ribbon. The top of the box was a lid, with a flap tucked into the body of the box. He untucked it and looked into the box. In it was a glass globe, nestling in fine gray tissue paper. He drew it out carefully. It wasn't a proper globe because it was open at the bottom, or, as Arthur realized, turned it over at the top with a thick rim. It was a bowl, a fish bowl. It was made of the most wonderful glass, perfectly transparent, yet with an extraordinary silver-gray quality, as if crystal and slate had gone into its making. Arthur slowly turned it over and over in his hand. It was one of the most beautiful objects he had ever seen, but he was entirely perplexed by it. He looked into the box, but other than the tissue paper there was nothing. On the side of the box there was nothing. He turned the bowl round again. It was wonderful. It was exquisite, but it was a fish bowl. He tapped it with his thumbnail and rang with a deep and glorious chime which was sustained for longer than seemed possible, and when at last it faded, it seemed not to die away, but to drift off into other worlds as into a deep sea dream. Entranced, Arthur turned it round yet again, and this time the light from the dusty little bedside lamp caught it at a different angle and glittered on some fine abrasions of the fishbowl's surface. He held it up, adjusting the angle to the light, and suddenly saw clearly the finely engraved shapes of words shadowed on the glass. "So long," they said, "and thanks," and that was all. He blinked and understood nothing. For fully 5 more minutes he turned the object around and around, held it to the light at different angles, tapped it for its mesmerizing chime, and pondered on the meaning of the shadowy letters, but could find none. Finally he stood up, filled the bowl with water from the tap, and put it back on the table next to the television. He shook the little babblefish from his ear and dropped it wriggling into the bowl. He wouldn't be needing it anymore except for watching foreign movies. He returned to lie on his bed and turned out the light. He lay still and quiet. He absorbed the enveloping darkness, slowly relaxed his limbs from end to end, eased and regulated his breathing, gradually cleared his mind of all thought, closed his eyes, and was completely incapable of getting to sleep. The night was uneasy with rain. The rain clouds themselves had now moved on and were currently concentrating their attention on a small cafe just outside of Bournemouth. But the sky through which they had passed had been disturbed by them, and now wore a damply ruffled air, as if it didn't know what else it might not do if further provoked. The moon was out in a watery way. It looked like a ball of paper from the back pocket of jeans that have just come out of the washing machine, which only time and ironing would tell if it was an old shopping list or a 5-pound note. The wind flickered about a little, like the tail of a horse that's trying to decide what sort of mood it's in tonight, and a bell somewhere chimed midnight. The skylight creaked open. It was stiff and had to be jiggled and persuaded a little because the frame was slightly rotten, and the hinge had some time in its life been rather sensibly painted over, but eventually it was open. The strut was found to prop it, and a figure struggled out into a narrow gully between the opposing pitches of the roof. The figure stood and watched the sky in silence. The figure was completely unrecognizable as the wild-looking creature who had burst crazily into the cottage a little over an hour ago. Gone was the ragged, threadbare dressing gown, smeared with the mud of 100 worlds, stained with junk food condiment from 100 grimy spaceports. Gone was the tangled mane of hair. Gone the long and knotted beard, flourishing eco-structure and all. Instead, there was Arthur Dent, smooth and casual, in corduroys and a bulky sweater. His hair was cropped and washed, his chin clean-shaven. Only the eyes still said that whatever it was the universe thought it was doing to him, he would still like it to please stop. They were not the same eyes with which he had last looked out at this particular scene, and the brain which interpreted the images the eyes resolved was not the same brain. There had been no surgery involved, just the continual wrenching of experience. The night seemed like an alive thing to him at this moment, the dark earth around him a being in which he was rooted. He could feel like a tingle on distant nerve ends and flood of far river, the roll of invisible hills, the knot of heavy rain clouds parked somewhere away to the south. He could sense, too, the thrill of being a tree, which was something he hadn't expected. He knew that it felt good to curl your toes in the earth, but he'd never realized it could feel quite as good as that. He could sense an almost unseemly wave of pleasure reaching at him all the way from the new forest. He must try this summer, he thought, to see what having leaves felt like. From another direction he felt the sensation of being a sheep startled by a flying saucer, but it was virtually indistinguishable from the feeling of being a sheep startled by anything else that it ever encountered. For they were creatures who learned very little on their journey through life, and would be startled to see the sun rising in the morning, and astonished by all the green stuff in the fields. He was surprised to find he could feel the sheep being startled by the sun that morning, and the morning before, and being startled by a clump of trees the day before that. He could go further and further back, but it got dull because all it consisted of was sheep being startled by things they had been startled by the day before. He left the sheep and let his mind drift outward sleepily in developing ripples, but felt the presence of other minds, hundreds of them, thousands in a web, some sleepy, some sleeping, some terribly excited, one fractured. He passed it fleetingly and tried to feel for it again, but it eluded him like the other card with an apple on it in a memory course. He felt a spasm of excitement because he knew instinctively who it was, or at least knew who it was he wanted it to be. And once you know what it is you want to be true, instinct is a very useful device for enabling you to know that it is. He instinctively knew that it was Finny, and that he wanted to find her, but he could not. He strained too much for it. He could feel he was losing his strange new faculty. So he relaxed the search and let his mind wander easily once more. And again he felt the fracture. Again he couldn't find it. This time, whatever his instincts were busy telling him, it was all right to believe. He wasn't certain that it was Finny, or perhaps it was a different fracture this time. It had the same disjointed quality, but it seemed a more general feeling of fracture. Deeper, not a single mind, maybe not a mind at all. It was different. He let his mind sink slowly and wildly into the earth, rippling, seeping, sinking. He was following the earth through its days, drifting with the rhythms of its myriad pulses, seeping through the webs of its life, swelling with its tides, turning with its weight. Always the fracture kept returning, a dull, disjointed, distant ache. And now he was flying through a land of light. The light was time, the tides of it were days recorded and receded. The fracture he had sensed, the second fracture, lay in the distance before him across the land, the thickness of a single hair across the dreaming landscape of days of earth, and suddenly he was upon it. He danced dizzily over the edge as the dreamland dropped sheer away beneath him, a stupefying precipice into nothing. Him wildly twisting, clawing at nothing, flailing in horrifying space, spinning, falling. Across the jagged chasm had been another land, another time, an older world, not fractured from, but hardly joined, two earths he woke. He could breeze brush the feverish sweat standing on his forehead. The nightmare was spent, and so he felt was he. His shoulders drooped, he gently rubbed his eyes with tips of his fingers. At last he was sleepy as well as very tired. As to what it meant, if it meant anything at all, he would think about it in the morning. For now he would go to bed and sleep. His own bed, his own sleep. He could see his house in the distance and wondered why this was. It was silhouetted against the moonlight, and he recognized its rather dull blockish shape. He looked about him and noticed that he was about 18 inches above the rose bushes of one of the neighbors, John Ainsworth. His rose bushes were carefully tended, pruned back for the winter, strapped to canes and labeled, and Arthur wondered what he was doing above them. He wondered what was holding him there, and when he discovered that nothing was holding him there, he crashed awkwardly to the ground. He picked himself up, brushed himself down, and hobbled back to his house on a sprained ankle. He undressed and toppled into bed. While he was asleep, the phone rang again. It rang for fully 15 minutes and caused him to turn over twice. It never, however, stood a chance of waking him up. Chapter 8. Arthur awoke feeling wonderful, absolutely fabulous, refreshed, overjoyed to be home. Bouncing with energy, hardly disappointed at all to discover it was the middle of February. He almost danced to the fridge, found the 3 least hairy things in it, put them on a plate, and watched them intently for 2 minutes. Since they made no attempt to move within that time, he called them breakfast and ate them. Between them, they killed a virulent space disease he'd picked up without knowing it in the Phlegethon gas swamps a few days earlier, which otherwise would have killed off half the population of the Western Hemisphere, blinded the other half, and driven everyone else psychotic and sterile, so the Earth was lucky there. He felt strong, he felt healthy. He vigorously cleared away the junk mail with a spade and then buried the cat. Just as he was finishing that, the phone rang, but he let it ring while he maintained a moment's respectful silence. Whoever it was would ring back if it was important. He kicked the mud off his shoes and went back inside. There had been a small number of significant letters in the piles of junk. Some documents from the council dated 3 years earlier relating to the proposed demolition of his house, and some other letters about the setting up of a public inquiry into the whole bypass scheme in the area. There was also an old letter from Greenpeace, the ecological pressure group, to which he occasionally made contributions, asking for help with their scheme to release dolphins and orcas from captivity, and some postcards from friends vaguely complaining that he never got in touch these days. He collected these together and put them in a cardboard file, which he marked things to do. Since he was feeling so vigorous and dynamic that morning, he even added the word urgent. He unpacked his towel and another few odd bits and pieces from the plastic bag he had acquired at the Port Brasta Make-a Market. The slogan on the side was a clever and elaborate pun in lingua censori, which was completely incomprehensible in any other language and therefore entirely pointless for a duty-free shop at a spaceport. The bag also had a hole in it, so he threw it away. He realized with a sudden twinge that something else must have dropped out in the small spacecraft that had brought him to Earth, kindly going out of its way to drop him right beside the A303. He had lost his battered and space-worn copy of the thing which had helped him find his way across the unbelievable waste of space that he had traversed. He had lost the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Well, he told himself, this time I really won't be needing it again. He had some calls to make. He had decided how to deal with the mass of contradictions his return journey precipitated, which was what he would simply brazen it out. He phoned the BBC and asked to be put through to his department head. Oh, hello, Arthur Dent here. Look, sorry I haven't been in for 6 months, but I've gone mad. Oh, not to worry. Thought it was probably something like that. Happens here all the time. How soon can we expect you? When do hedgehogs start hibernating? Sometime in spring, I think. I'll be in shortly after that. Righty-o. He flipped through the yellow pages and made a short list of numbers to try. Oh, hello. Is that the Old Elms Hospital? Yes, I was just phoning to see if I could have a word with Fenella. Lord, silly me. I'll forget my own name next. Fenella, isn't this ridiculous? Patient of yours, dark-haired girl, came in last night? I'm afraid we don't have any patients called Fenella. Oh, don't you? I meant Fiona, of course. We just call her Finn. I'm sorry. Goodbye. Click. 6 conversations along these lines began to take their toll on his mood, a vigorous dynamic optimism. And he decided that before it deserted him entirely, he would take it down to the pub and parade it a little. He had the perfect idea for explaining away every inexplicable weirdness about himself at a stroke, and he whistled as he pushed open the door which had so daunted him last night. "Arthur!" He grinned cheerfully at the boggling eyes that stared at him from all corners of the pub, and told them what a wonderful time he'd had in Southern California. Hopefully that'll fix it. Doesn't look like it. Dang it! Is that better? Nope. Yes? No? No, yes? Chapter 9. He accepted another pint and took a pull at it. Of course, I had my own personal alchemist, too. You what? He was getting silly and he knew it. Exuberance and Hall and Woodhouse Best Bitter was a mixture to be wary of. One of the first effects it has is to stop you being wary of things. And the point at which Arthur should have stopped and explained no more was the point at which he started instead to get inventive. "Oh yes," he insisted with a happy glazed smile. "That's why I've lost so much weight." "What?" said his audience. "Oh yes," he said again. "The Californians have rediscovered alchemy, oh yes." He smiled again. "Only," he said, "was in a much more useful form than that which he paused thoughtfully to let a little grammar a symbol in his head, in which the ancients used to practice it, or at least," he added, "failed to practice it. They couldn't get it to work, you know. Nostradamus and that rot couldn't cut it." "Nostradamus?" said one of his audience. "I didn't think he was an alchemist," said another. "I thought," said the third, "he was a seer." "He became a seer," said Arthur to his audience, the component parts of which were beginning to bob and blur a little, "because he was such a lousy alchemist. You should know that." He took another pull at his beer. It was something he had not tasted for 8 years. He tasted it, and tasted it. "What has alchemy got to do," asked a bit of the audience, "with losing weight?" "I'm glad you asked that," said Arthur. "Very glad, and I will now tell you that the connection is between," he paused, "between those two things, the things you mentioned, I'll tell you." He paused and maneuvered his thoughts. It was like watching oil tankers doing 3-point turns in the English Channel. "They've discovered how to turn excess body fat into gold," he said in a sudden blurt of coherence. "Kidding!" "Oh yes," he said. "No." Here corrected himself. "They have." He rounded on the doubting part of his audience, which was all of it, and so it took a little while to round it on completely. "Have you been to California?" he demanded. "Do you know the sort of stuff they do there?" 3 members of his audience said that they had and that he was talking nonsense. "You haven't seen anything," insisted Arthur. "Oh yes," because someone was offering to buy another round. "The evidence," he said, pointing at himself and not missing by more than a couple inches, "is before your eyes. 14 hours in a trance," he said. "In a tank, in a trance. I was in a tank, I think," he added after a thoughtful pause. "But he said that." He waited patiently while the next round was duly distributed. He composed the next bit of his story in his mind, which was going to be something about the tank needing to be oriented along a line drawn perpendicularly from the pole star to a baseline drawn between Mars and Venus, and was about to start trying to say it when he decided to give it a miss. "Long time," he said instead, "in a tank, in a trance." He looked round severely at his audience to make sure it was all following attentively. He resumed. "Where was I?" he said. "In a trance," said one. "In a tank," said another. "Oh yes," said Arthur. "Thank you." "And slowly," he said, pressing onward. "Slowly, slowly, slowly, all your excess body fat turns to," he paused for effect, "sub Q, sub U, sub 2K." He paused for a breath. Subcutaneous gold, which you can have surgically removed. Getting out of the tank is hell. What did you say?" "I was just clearing my throat." "I think you doubt me." "I was clearing my throat." "She was clearing her throat," confirmed a significant part of the audience in a low rumble. "Oh yes," said Arthur. "All right. And you then split the proceeds." He paused again for a math break. 50-50 with the alchemist. Make a lot of money. He looked swayingly around at his audience and could not help but be aware of an air of skepticism about their jumbled faces. He felt very affronted by this. How else, he demanded, could I afford to have my face dropped? Friendly arms began to help him home. Listen, he protested as the cold February breeze brushed his face. Not being lived in is all the rage in California at the moment. You've got to look as if you've seen the galaxy. Life, I mean. You've got to look as if you've seen life. That's what I got, a face drop. Give me 8 years, I said. I hope being 30 doesn't come back into fashion, or I've wasted a lot of money. He lapsed into silence for a while as the friendly arms continued to help him along the lane to his house. Got in yesterday, he mumbled. I'm very, very, very happy to be home. Somewhere very like it. Jet lag, muttered one of his friends. A long trip from California really mucks you up for a couple of days. I don't think he's been there at all, muttered another. I wonder where he has been and what's happened to him. After a little sleep, Arthur got up and pottered round the house a bit. He felt woozy and a little low, still disoriented by the journey. He wondered how he was going to find Finny. He sat and looked at the fishbowl. He tapped it again, and despite being full of water and a small yellow babblefish, which was gulping its way around rather dejectedly, it still chimed its deep and resonant chime as clearly and mesmerically as before. Someone is trying to thank me, he thought to himself. He wondered who, and for what. Let's see how long this next chapter is. Alright. Chapter 10. At the third stroke it will be 1, 2:30, and 20 seconds. Ford Prefect suppressed a little giggle of evil satisfaction, realized that he had no reason to suppress it, and laughed out loud, a wicked laugh. He switched the incoming signal through from the sub-Ethernet to the ship's superb hi-fi system, and the odd, rather stilted sing-song voice spoke out with remarkable clarity round the cabin. At the third stroke, it will be 1, 2:30, and 30 seconds. Beep, beep, beep. He tweaked the volume up just a little, while keeping a careful eye on a rapidly changing table of figures on the ship's computer display. For the length of time he had in mind, the question of power consumption became significant. He didn't want a murder on his conscience. At the third stroke, it will be 1, 2:30, and 40 seconds. Beep, beep, beep. He checked around the small ship. He walked down the short corridor. At the third stroke, he stuck his head into the small, functional, gleaming steel bathroom. It will be. It sounded fine in there. He looked into the tiny sleeping quarters. 1, 2:30. It sounded a bit muffled, but there was a towel hanging over one of the speakers. He ticked down the towel. 50 seconds. Fine. He checked out the packed cargo hold and wasn't at all satisfied with the sound. There was altogether too much crated junk in the way. He stepped back out and waited for the door to still. He broke open a closed control panel and pushed the jettison button. He didn't know why he hadn't thought of that before. A whooshing, rumbling noise died away quickly into silence. After a pause, a slight hiss could be heard again. It stopped. He waited for the green light to show and then opened the door again onto a new empty cargo hold. 1, 33, and 50 seconds. Very nice. Beep, beep, beep. He then went and had a last thorough examination of the emergency suspended animation chamber, which was where he particularly wanted it to be heard. At the third stroke, it will be 1, 34 precisely. He shivered as he peered down through the heavily frosted covering of the dim bulk of the form within. One day, who knew when, it would wake, and when it did, it would know what time it was. Not exactly local time, true, but what the heck? He double-checked the computer display above the freezer bed, dimmed the lights, and checked it again. At the third stroke, it will be. He tiptoed out and returned to the control cabin. 1, 34, and 20 seconds. The voice sounded as clear as if he were hearing it over a phone in London, which he wasn't. not by a long way. He gazed out into the inky night. The star he could see in the distance, the size of a brilliant biscuit crumb, was Zondostina, or as it was known on the world from which the rather stilted sing-song voice was being received, Pleiades Zeta. The bright orange curve that filled over half the visible area was the giant gas planet Sassafras Magna, where the Zaxisian battleships docked, and just rising over its horizon was a small cool blue moon, Pepin. At the third stroke it will be. For 20 minutes he sat and merely watched as the gap between the ship and Pepin closed, as the ship's computer teased and needed the numbers that would bring it into a loop around the little moon, close the loop, and keep it there, orbiting in perpetual obscurity. 1:59. His original plan had been to close down all external signaling and radiation from the ship, to render it as nearly invisible as possible unless you were actually looking at it. But then he'd had an idea he preferred. It would now emit one single continuous beam, pencil-thin, broadcasting the incoming time signal to the planet of the signal's origin, which it would not reach for 400 years, traveling at light speed, but where it would probably cause something of a stir when it did. Beep, beep, beep. He sniggered. He didn't like to think of himself as the sort of person who giggled or sniggered, but he had to admit that he had been giggling and sniggering almost continuously for over half an hour now. At the third stroke, the ship was now locked almost perfectly into its perpetual orbit round a little-known and never-visited moon. Almost perfect. One thing only remained. He ran again the computer simulation of the launching of the ship's little escapo buggy, balancing actions, reactions, tangential forces, all the mathematical poetry of motion, and saw that it was good. Before he left, he turned out the lights, as his tiny little cigar tube of an escape craft stepped out on the beginning of its 3-day journey to the orbiting space station, Port Sisyphon. It rode for a few seconds, a long pencil-thin beam of radiation that was starting out on a long journey still. The third stroke, it will be 2:13 and 50 seconds. He giggled and sniggered. He would have laughed out loud, but he didn't have room. Beep, beep, beep. Alright, so we're going to leave it there and go to our second music break. On this break we have Miss Mia Savage with her group Antidote for Savages, and she shall be singing Not a Phase, Bury Me in Heaven, Singing to Your Grave, and the bottom line, you guys don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this music break.
Break the sound of this song. I'll be waiting, don't let this go. only choice. No record, no work, no job, no savings of money.
Just a choice right now between fear and love. Choice right now between fear and love.
Welcome back, and thanks so much for hanging out with me tonight on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. We're a little laggy. So at this point in the show is when we watch a video together. A creepy video. Hopefully this isn't laggy. We'll just have to wait and see, I suppose. This is a Scary Comp version 94, or video 94, from Bizarre Bub. If you have not subscribed, please do. Also, please subscribe to us on YouTube or wherever you may be listening. Alright, here we go.
In the following video, a nurse working at a hospital decides to go inside a room where many doctors and nurses are afraid to be in. The room in question is located on a floor that, according to rumors, is haunted. It isn't known if the rumors are true, but apparently, after what was captured, it may be the case that something truly strange is happening on this floor. On March 9th of 2021, a nurse known as Shanae Richardson pays a visit to the floor in question. On this floor, there's a hidden room that for some reason is blocked off from access. So, one night, Shanae decides to enter this room. She had gained access by asking a custodian to open it for her, but little did she know, this was a bad idea. The following is her video. Watch.
So everybody wants to see what's behind the door, so I'm back and I'm going to show you what's finally behind this door, okay? Alright, so one more time, this is everything that's wrote on the door behind this door in this hospital, and it's been unlocked, so I'm going to go inside. Feels good.
I don't know if you should be doing that.
It happens quickly, but in case you missed it, here it is again.
What is it?
It now makes sense as to why Shanae had suddenly shut the door. Out of instinct, she had backed away upon seeing what looks like a face staring at Shanae from a distance. Its disembodied head seemingly stays in place without moving an inch, or at least it seems like that, because apparently viewers claim that the head can be seen moving for just a bit. She wasn't exactly sure what she'd seen, but whatever it was, it prompted a sudden urge within her to leave the space immediately. It was only after watching the video that she saw what it was. Not much else is known about this incident or what occurred afterwards, but until there's an update, this incident remains a mystery.
Number 9.
On July 28th of 2024, a certain video was shared among many residents of a town where something quite peculiar had taken place. It happened right outside someone's house at around 7 p.m. Those who live here had thankfully caught the event on camera via surveillance footage, but the video itself is just part of the reason why neighbors are concerned. Whatever happened here had sent someone to the hospital. It was immediately after knowing this that residents of this neighborhood became terrified. The following is what was captured. Watch.
What the heck? He just slinked out that door. Oh, quick like. Oh, did you see that shadow?
It was immediately after being knocked out by something that two people, presumably friends or relatives, come over to assist the man. Accompanying them is a dog that for some reason heads over to the spot where the object had seemingly flown from. It isn't clear why the dog had gone there first, but viewers think that maybe it was seeing something no one else could. Although quite strange, it's what occurred before that's most baffling. What looks like a flying object appears to strike the man from inside the house. Now it's worth noting that he's okay, but he did need a couple of stitches afterwards. But strangely, he doesn't recall what happened. This whole incident is a blur to him as the impact was intense. Not much else is known about this occurrence, except that it took place in Colombia. But like most videos, I'll let you come up with your own conclusions. Just what exactly was caught on camera?
It was a coke ghost. Coco ghost. Number 8.
It's nighttime in the following footage when a baby monitor inside a child's crib captures something that its parents have been worried about. It was all caught on the night of October 23rd of 2023. Suffice to say, their concerns have intensified after seeing what was captured. Even worse is that after this incident, their oldest child, who's only a year older, did this. Now before showing the clip, it's worth noting that they were being babysat by a relative who recorded the whole incident. Take a look.
Shay Shay. Cheyenne. Cheyenne.
Now what's concerning about this is that the parents have seen this behavior before in the house they used to live in. The house in question is where this footage took place, and it's what happens in it that made them move out. Living in their old home, their children used to stare at things that didn't appear to be there. Sometimes they would start crying after staring at nothing. Something was upsetting them, but the parents weren't sure what exactly that was until they saw this. After watching countless recordings from the baby monitor inside their youngest child's crib, one video caught their attention. The following is that video. Watch. It's for this reason, among others, that the family has moved out of this house. They believe that what was captured had been the spirit or entity that's been upsetting their children. Replaying the footage, one can tell that this black, shadowy mass is anything but a person. The way it glides past the crib and the fact that it flies towards the ceiling suggests that this was something else. Whatever this might have been, the parents hope that it hasn't made its way into their new home. If so, then they don't know what else to do. For now, the family continues to share videos of paranormal happenings from their past home in the hopes that someone could explain what's happening and see if anything must be done to keep them safe.
Number 7.
In the following video, a teenage boy and his family are taking a tour of a new house they had just moved into. The family in this footage hasn't had the chance to check out their new home until now, so naturally, out of excitement, they bring a camera to record this moment. But unbeknownst to them, this special occasion would suddenly turn creepy. It would be at this house they recently called home where something very strange happens. The following is their footage. Take a look.
Okay. Let me just take this off. Oh, no, I can't take this off. At least I can't take it off. I think it's stuck.
Oh, he's up the camera.
Where is it? What? I know, we can. That's the attic?
You wanna go in there?
That's the attic?
Wait, you wanna go in there?
I wanna see what's...
Out of nowhere, the sound of a screaming child is heard from somewhere inside the house. Realizing that no one else was home except an older relative, they bolt out as fast as possible, knowing that what just happened was not normal. Either a child from outside the house had screamed, or, as viewers believe, something else was captured. Listening closely, the scream seems to have come from inside the house, but strangely, there hadn't been another child inside. If no other kid was present, then who was heard on camera? With no further updates or videos from this family, it remains unknown as to who or even what had spooked them.
Is that it's not gonna end.
Number 6.
It's not gonna end
On the rocky cliffs of an ocean side, a very peculiar video was taken. The video itself starts off by showing a scenic view of the ocean, but apparently, it wouldn't just be the ocean that astounds the person recording, but rather something else. They hadn't noticed what was captured until much later, and they were left even more spooked after learning that this place has had many people pass away, specifically from jumping off. Nicole, the person who took this, explains what she captured. Take a look.
Rewatching this video I took of the ocean, and I just now realized I captured a voice. Clearly, it's not my voice.
Look at it, mate. It's the ocean.
Look at it, mate. It's the ocean.
A voice, clear as day, is heard on camera. No one else had been around, which rules out the possibility of this being said by someone close. Even weirder is that the voice sounds staticky, giving it a robotic quality.
Look at it, mate. It's the ocean.
From Australian to that of a pirate's voice, viewers believe that this may have been the spirit of someone who unfortunately passed away on this spot. Just like Nicole, they too might have been enjoying the view. But whether ghost or not, the voice alone is quite strange and continues to baffle Nicole to this day. Now the following video comes from Isabel Riley, who no doubt believes that she may have evidence of something that can't be explained. The video she's made shows this evidence, which was captured by her boss, who later shared it with her. According to her boss, he was at a restaurant in New Orleans known as Antoine's. Now at this restaurant, there's a huge wine cellar with hundreds, if not thousands of wine bottles worth millions. So, out of curiosity, he checks it out. But if only he knew what was down there, he wouldn't have gone. While being in the cellar, he snaps a couple of photos, some of which show the owner of the restaurant who is giving him a tour. In one photo, we see the restaurant owner on his laptop, who apparently was placing bids for more wines during an online auction. The boss takes a few more photos and then leaves the restaurant before calling it a day. The next morning, he's on his phone looking at his camera roll when he notices something odd in one of the pictures that he took. Isabel presents those images. Take a look.
So this is the first picture that he showed me from the wine cellar. You can see this guy who is on his laptop at auction doing whatever. And here is the next picture that he took.
What the heck? It's Tina Turner.
So we all see that. That is a full body apparition. It looks like a woman in this like black Victorian dress. And when I was showed this, I genuinely had full body chills. This is insane. I've never seen anything like this, and I need to not be alone in seeing this because holy.
Unlike anything Isabel has ever seen, a seemingly full-bodied apparition appears clear as day in the pic. A cursed image is what some believe this might be. Others, however, have no idea what was captured. If only 2 people had been in the cellar, then who was the third person? And why do they appear to be dressed in clothes that seem to have come from the 1800s? They, or it, were nowhere in sight when the photo was taken. It's for this reason that Isabel's boss is certain that something ghostly was caught. Whether a ghost or something else, viewers can't help but feel immensely uneasy when looking at this pic. They don't know why, but something about it disturbs them. While Isabel has yet to figure out what was captured, viewers are certain that this was paranormal. But as always, let me know your thoughts on this one. On a Thursday night, somewhere in Florida, 2 friends decide to record themselves at a slumber party when something pretty creepy is captured. Both friends hadn't noticed anything peculiar in the video until one of their moms had seen the footage.
This is my daughter and her friend. Please watch closely between them. No one else was up in my home.
Heather, the mother in question, is baffled by this footage, given that it took place inside her home, where other strange things have happened before. Occasionally, she would catch her dog looking at something that doesn't appear to be there, and other times, she would see her cat staring at a space that's completely empty. Now, although she thinks there might be an explanation for both common occurrences, she can't say the same for the following incident. This footage is unlike anything she's ever seen. It's late at night when this is captured.
This is my daughter and her friend. Please watch closely between them. No one else was up in my home. Look between them right
I'm a crochet crafting
now.
woman.
What was meant to be a fun little video has turned into a scene out of a horror movie. Without realizing it, both friends had caught something moving in the background. It appears briefly for just a split second before exiting from view. Whether a person or something else, no one had noticed it until the video was sent to Isabel's mother. It was shortly thereafter that both girls became aware of this mysterious figure. While it is uncertain as to what was captured, they can't help but think that something otherworldly was present during that night. This one continues to remain a mystery.
Number 3.
Now, this next video was recorded by a security guard who was on duty during the night of October 30th of 2012. The quality of the video may not be the greatest, but it's what happens in it that definitely makes up for it. The guard who took this was disturbed, to say the least. Although where they work is well known for strange happenings, the parking structure of a Costa Rican mall is the last place they would think of as being haunted. But this isn't surprising, as many visitors of this mall have caught footage of something strange in the parking lot. It's really the reason why most people don't like parking here at night. Even to this day, security guards are hesitant to patrol the parking lot at night, as stories and videos like this have left them pretty spooked. The year is 20.
So yeah, I can attest, as I am not only a caregiver, but I also do overnight security. Shadow beings, UFOs, different things like that. At one point, I'm doing security by myself at the fairgrounds, and I'm sitting in my car right next to the building, and all of a sudden I feel something hit my car. I'm looking around, I don't see anything. I'm like, what the heck? I'm thinking it's my old man came to, scare me during the night because I am working by myself, and something slams against the side of my car. I look around everywhere. I don't see anything. I'm hitting my brakes, to try to light up, what's behind my car or whatnot. And then in front of my car, all of a sudden I see a ghost, like in a football pose. like it's gonna run towards me, and I turn on my headlights to see, like, what the heck is that? Thinking it could be a person or something, and all of a sudden it just dissipates as it's like starts to run. I don't know if it's because the light, because I turned on the light or what, but that was pretty trippy. But I love overnight security. It's so exciting.
2012, and on this night, a security guard sees that one of the cameras inside the parking lot is sensing motion. The space is entirely empty, so there shouldn't be any movement going on. Not sure what's happening, the guard calls someone to check the space, but as they check, this happens.
Whoa.
Gerardo, fíjate detrás tuyo.
See, I'm telling you, shadow beams.
¿Usted está copiando el monitor? Dígame algo. ¿Salió algo ahí? Correcto. Aquí salió algo raro. Mae.
Correctamundo.
Sí. Véngase mejor.
You better come back here before you get possessed.
As seen on video, the parking structure is devoid of any visitors during this time. If no one had been there, then what exactly had set off the sensor on the camera? It only appears to be going off at this exact spot, and it was already going off before the guard had arrived. Well, after a few seconds, it becomes apparent as to what was being picked up by the camera. A dark, shadow-like figure that appears out of nowhere. In a stealthy manner, the shadow inches closer and closer to the unsuspecting guard before suddenly vanishing in an instant. Although taken in 2012, visitors continue to report strange occurrences within this parking lot, and no doubt believe that the San Pedro Mall in Costa Rica is haunted through and through. Now this next video comes from a woman named Kels, who in 2020 caught footage of something she can't explain to this day. The majority of her videos consist of her in front of a camera while doing tarot card readings. She's been doing this for quite some time now, but among all her videos, one in particular stands out from the rest. It was while doing a tarot card reading that Kels captured this.
I keep hearing stop. The music just stopped. Weird. Anyway, I keep hearing stop. And the fan just turned on. Okay, that's the message I'm getting. In order for you to go where you need to go, you need to stop where you are now and let spirit take over. With the Four of Wands card, I'm definitely seeing there's a union. There's somebody waiting for you on the other side in love. But you also have opportunities coming in. Your spiritual journey. Your spiritual journey about to take a whole new level, a whole new turn because you've been patient for so long. If you look at the, let's see if I can get close. If you look at the Eight of Pentacles,
To Kels, this occurrence doesn't faze her, considering that this has happened many times before. It was just then that she was able to get it on camera. Despite the music stopping on cue and the fan suddenly turning on only seconds later, Kels does not think this was merely a coincidence, but rather someone or something trying to communicate with her. Everything that went on during this moment, according to her, was a sign. But of course, like all videos, you be the judge. Was something supernatural at work here? Or might there be something to explain this? If you caught something creepy on camera, or if there's any ghost videos you'd like me to check out and include in the next compilation, you can send them over to scaryvideos444@gmail.com. That being said, let's get back to the video.
Number 1.
In this last video, a woman named Rosanna is lying in bed when the most disturbing thing is caught on camera. Now, although she was terrified to the point of being paralyzed by fear, she tries her best to film this incident, and for good reason. Getting this on camera would be the best evidence she's had so far in trying to prove that something isn't right with her apartment. Her place is not what it seems, and it's for this reason that her children can't live with her. Things at home have gotten so bad that she fears for their safety, including her cats. In one video, Rosanna's cat does this.
Yeah, it's time to move if your cat starts tripping.
Hey!
Rosanna's choice to keep her family away from this place is mainly due to this and many other occurrences. But as of recent, something's happened that's fully convinced her to keep not just the family away, but also herself. It's late at night.
And I don't know if you guys know this or not, but cats are not only like really good companions, but they're really good at defending the house against not good spirits. So even if you're not a cat lover and you have a haunted house, it's a pretty good idea to get a cat because it will protect you from bad things.
Night when this is captured.
Excuse me. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. You know what this reminds me of? Oh my god. I just have to share a story with you guys really quick. Story time. So, I was house sitting for a friend as her and her husband went to California. Trying to make it bigger. It's not working. Okay. And they went to California to go on the Queen Mary and do some other things. And so they needed me to house sit. And she's like, oh, you know, you don't have to come over beforehand, you know, just show up. She's got 2 Doberman pinchers. And I'm like, no, dude, I'm not just going to show up at your house and think your dogs aren't going to eat me. But, so, you know, I take her dogs for walks every day and stuff like that. And they were really, really good dogs. And you'd tell they were totally missing her. One of them had anxiety really bad. And, you know, being that its mom was gone, it would just like mostly hang out in the bedroom unless I went and took him on walks and stuff. The other one would cuddle up next to me and was such a sweetie. But you know me, like I watch paranormal videos or listen to paranormal videos or listen to ghost stories. Because I can't help but watch the screen, so I'll put on ghost stories like Let's Read or Be Busta or whatever. Be Busta used to be my favorite, now it's Let's Read. I just like the tone of his voice and the ease of it, but I'm sitting there and I'm watching some paranormal shows on her television and, you know, trying to wear myself down and get quiet. And I hear this. Okay, so she lives in it looks like a fifth wheel or whatever. It's like a pretty good sized trailer. The wallpaper on it is like corduroy, so there's lines on the wall. It's like corduroy fabric on the walls. All of a sudden I hear a rip. I don't know if you guys have ever like scratched like a corduroy surface or whatnot, but I hear this rip. And I looked the direction where I'm hearing this, and it's right by the door where she's got a thing where her keys are hanging up. And there's also a fly swatter and some other things. And the fly swatter was swinging like this, and the keys were swinging too, and they fell off and hit the ground. I'm like, what the hell was that? Like, there's no explanation for this. So I go over, stop the fly swatter from swinging, pick up the keys, hang them back up, turn the show back on, and I'm watching it, and all of a sudden I start getting chest pains. And I'm getting chest pains, and I'm just feeling like really tired. I'm like, holy shit, I hope I'm not having a heart attack, like I'm out here in the middle of nowhere. And this is in between Bayfield and Ignacio. Ignacio is Ute Reservation town, basically. It's where I go to work when I work with my girl that I caretake for, and I'm just having chest pains and I'm feeling really tired, and all of a sudden I just crash out of nowhere, which is odd for me because, you know, my bedtime's like 4, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. You can't help it. I believe it's due to my paranormal experiences as a child. Sorry, the lights are being weird over here. But due to my paranormal experiences as a child, I have like paranormal PTSD, so it's hard for me to get to sleep at a decent hour. And I just crash out all of a sudden on her couch. And then I come to, and I'm like, holy shit, I fell off the couch because I'm like on all fours on the floor in front of the couch where I was sitting. And I'm trying to crawl. I can't. I feel like I've been drugged or whatever. Like, I would say I'm really, really drunk, but I can't handle myself when I'm drunk, like as far as walking and crawling and doing whatever. But I feel like I've been drugged. Like something's wrong with me. So I'm crawling, trying to, turn myself and get back to the couch. And I turn around and I see myself on the couch. I'm like, holy crap, I just died. And I'm like, I need to get to my body. I need to get back to my body before it's too late. I need to reinsert my spirit into my body. And so, like, the best annotation or the best description I can give to this is like a drunk baby, like trying to crawl and falling back and forth like this. I'm trying to crawl towards my body and I cannot do it correctly. Like, I feel like something's really, really bad wrong with me. And, so I get back to my body and zip, just like that. I'm awake. And like, holy shit, what just happened? Pardon my French. Pardonnez-moi, s'il vous plaît. What just happened? And then talking to different people, I guess I like astraled out of my body. I've never intentionally astraled. The only time before that episode happened, I was in MRP, which is the Marine Corps. I call it the broken platoon because that's where all the broken people go. Like, if you have, health issues or you have a broken bone, or for me, it was like a fracture along the top of my foot where my jungle boots went. It fractured right there. Very first hump in combat training, basically almost fell on my face. And so I'm in MRP and I have an experience like that. And it was, okay, so I was raised from a certain age, I believe from the age of like 7 or 8 in the LDS church. And I was taught, don't play D&D, don't play with Ouija boards, blah, blah, blah. Well, I play D&D because there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, role playing, and it's actually quite fun. I actually enjoy it quite a bit. I haven't done it in a long time because I've just been busy with work and this podcast and stuff, but I used the Ouija board to talk to my mom. First time I tried it, all the girls were on it. It was during Hurricane Bonnie, and I'm in North Carolina, Camp Geiger, Camp Lejeune. And I get on there and I'm like, hey, can I talk to my mom? And it said no. And I was like, well, F you then, I'm not going to do this. And so I gave it back to the girls. I'm like, no, I'm not going to do this. If it's not going to let me talk to my mom, I have no reason to use it. And so I went to the head and I took a shower and came back and everybody was gone. I think they were at the front of the squad bay and they were watching a movie, probably Titanic, for the millionth freaking time. And the Ouija board is on my rack. It's on my bed. So I put my stuff away in my locker and go back over to my bed and I get on it. I didn't know the rules. I didn't know, like, you're not supposed to do it on your own or by yourself. And so I got on there and it just starts going off. Like, first it's really slow. And it said, tell your dad, tell Gary, tell Kathy, tell Greg, tell John, I'm okay, everything's okay, yada yada. Like, I had the lengthiest conversation ever with my mom. Like, when she passed, I was 5, almost 6. But yeah, it was awesome. She said she's with me whenever I need her, and she can fly and she can be where she wants whenever she wants. And it was just like really awesome affirmation and everything. Well, the girls come over and they're like, hey, Tess, trying to get my attention, trying to wake me up from this state that I'm in using this Ouija board. I did not feel them. I did not hear them. And then finally, like, I came to and I was like, what's going on? And they're like, we've been trying to get you, to come to for quite some time. Like, I was there, I was aware of the board, what was being said, but I did not hear them, I did not feel them. And after that was my first astral experience, and it was like the same as the second one that I was telling you guys about, where I feel like I'm drunk. Like, I can't walk properly. I'm sitting there like leaning on the walls and stuff, and we had some guys come in to fix something in the bathroom, and I'm going in there and I'm flirting with them and stuff. Like, this didn't actually happen. Like, I was there laying on the rack by the bathroom before lunchtime, just waiting for room to get in there because there was other girls in there. So I'm waiting to get into the head to, go use the restroom before lunchtime, and everybody's taking a while. So I laid down on the rack outside of it and fell asleep. And that's when I left my body and astraled. And so that was the first time I astraled. That was due to using a Ouija board. Second time I astraled was at my friend Glow's house, but that was pretty trippy stuff. So, and then I realized from talking to people that do this and know what they're doing that maneuvering your spiritual body is way different than trying to maneuver your physical body. But anyways, let's get back to this video. But yeah, I just had to share that really quick. Because that thing swinging on the wall in this video, like, totally reminded me of that. But it makes me wonder what was there that was causing that. Whoa, what the heck is going on? Is that like her portrait?
Now, Rosanna states that during this moment, she had seen a shadowy figure appear right behind the door. Soon after, she began to black out as though she was intoxicated.
See, what the heck?
The entirety of this incident is without a doubt pretty freaky. But while it still remains inconclusive on what occurred that night, Rosanna is certain that she won't be staying here for long. Until she has the funds to find another place, Rosanna will continue to own this strange apartment and presumably capture more evidence of these happenings. But as always, let me know your thoughts on this one. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Also, if you haven't already done so, please subscribe and make sure to hit the bell icon so you don't miss any uploads in the future. Also, be sure to check out the official TikTok account for this channel. That being said,
thanks so much for hanging out with me tonight on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. It was a pleasure having you hang out with me for story time, reading Douglas Adams' So Long and Thanks for All the Fish. That's the 4th book in the Hitchhiker's Guide from the Galaxy series. And thanks so much for watching that creepy video with me. It was super epic. Let me get over here really quick, like.